So we're going to continue looking at uh, the other concepts. So far, we've talked about strings and variables and types. So now we're going to talk about, uh, let me switch to Markdown. We're going to talk about something called F strings. Let me make a title for this. So what are F strings? Basically, you know, we can write English sentences and embed variables inside them. This allows us to dynamically change sentences. And I'll explain more about what this means. But F strings are very useful. Um, Let me open a few more code cells. Let's say we have a variable called uh, favorite food, right? Um, I'll just write pasta. And remember to run the cells each time. Don't forget. And we have another variable called second favorite food. Notice how I'm naming these variables with an underscore instead of a space. And that's something you have to do because if you have a space, it thinks that these are two different variables. So to make sure that it's, you know, just a single variable and make sure, there's a space either. I mean, there's an underscore here, or you can, capitalize F here. So, you can still understand that it says favorite food. So for second favorite food, I'll write lasagna and I'll run this. So now we have two variables. If I check the value of this, it says pasta. If I check the value of this, it says lasagna. That's great, right? That's what we wanted. But now I want to use these variables in a sentence. And I don't want to write pasta and lasagna specifically, but instead I want to show whatever value is stored in favorite food and second favorite food. So let me, give you an example. So if we want to print sentences or, output sentences, we can just write them, you know, this is a sentence, right? Or we can use something called print. So, so you notice that this is one of the other special functions in Python. It turned green, just like type turned green. Um, and here we can do a lot more than just write a hard-coded sentence. If I write the letter F here, you see how everything turned purple? So this means that, Python sees this as something special because the color turned different. All the other strings that we've seen so far were brown, right? But as soon as I put this F, it turned purple. So what F strings, and this is, why it's called F strings because it starts with an F. What it allows us to do is use our variables and embed them in the sentences. So I can write something like my favorite food is, and then instead of writing, you know, pasta, my second favorite food is lasagna. So you see how I hard coded everything right now? there's no need for F strings actually at the moment. So if I press play, I get this. That's great. But what if I want to change the value, my favorite food and second favorite food? What if I want to write pizza and, you know, fries or something? So remember, I didn't run the cells and that's why it's yellow. So I'm going to run this and run this. Now, if I check the value again for favorite food, instead of saying pasta, it should say pizza. Oops, pizza. And then for second favorite food, instead of lasagna, it should say fries. But then when I run this function again, I get the same values, pasta and lasagna. But we've actually updated our favorite food and second favorite foods, right? So this is where f strings comes into play. It takes the value directly from the variable and updates the sentence accordingly. So I'm going to make a few modifications to this original print sentence. I'm going to write an F here, which makes it an F string. And instead of pasta, which was our favorite food, I'm going to wrap open and close curly brackets. And inside it, paste the name of the variable, favorite food. And then instead of lasagna, I'm going to do something very similar. I'll open curly brackets, paste the variable name, and then close curly brackets. So now if I run this, I get my favorite food is pizza, my second favorite food is fries. Notice how what we actually wrote was not pizza here. We just wrote the name of the variable. For instance, if I change this now to uh, burgers, right? And I run this, and then I come here and run this one again. What do you think it would say? Would it say my favorite food is pizza still? No, it should say my favorite food is burgers because we updated the value here. Since we updated the value here, it also updated the value here. And this is really the magic of F strings. It makes things more dynamic. It allows us to dynamically change sentences. So, if we change one thing, imagine we have a very long piece of code and we change one thing. Instead of, going through the whole code and changing, uh, you know, making sure that the one thing that we changed uh, is correct, throughout the code, we can just make use of variables here. And then F strings helps us, uh, you know, show, use these variables to print sentences with them. So, F strings are very useful. Um, in data science, you're going to probably not be writing things like my favorite food, etc. You'll probably write something like the standard deviation for, yeah, I don't know, this, the CPI index is, and then the value of that index. You might have a variable called CPI index. And then if this index changes, the value automatically changes. You don't have to go back to that piece of code and, uh, you know, manually update the value like we did here. So it comes in very handy because, often calculations will change as more data comes in. And you want to make sure that all the functions that you write are dynamic. All the code that you write is dynamic, meaning as, values change, the code can automatically adjust to it. So this is the great, use of it. By the way, this function is going to give me an error. And the reason for that is this variable CPI index is not defined. I just wrote it here, but it's actually, I never created anything like it. So for me to fix this, I would have to create a variable called CPI index. and give it some value, 63.92. Okay. And then if I run this, it shows the value here correctly. If for some reason this value changes to 23, so would this. And that's really what f strings are, useful for. One of the other things we're going to look at in this video are conditionals. So conditionals, maybe for data science, they might not be needed as much, but um, it helps to understand that, this is also something you can use. Python recognizes it as something special and you can, use it if need be. So conditionals, let me, switch to a markdown cell. I'm going to write conditionals. And these are really if else statements. So here's how I would describe it very plainly. If this is true, then, if something is true, then do X. Otherwise, do Y, right? So we can guide Python into doing certain actions based on some condition. And, this is where Python is good because it's the syntax itself is sort of very intuitive. In a language like C++, you would have to write a lot more code just to get this stuff out. So we can say something like if, 9 is greater than 0. By the way, these are operators. So we have the plus, minus, equals, all those operators. This is the greater than operator. So if 9 is greater than 0, you add a colon here. Notice how this line got automatically indented. This means that everything that we write now will be executed if this is true, if 9 is greater than 0. I'm just going to write print hello, right? And then if I press enter, it thinks I'm still trying to stay in this if. So I'm just going to press a backspace and instead now write else and have a colon. And in the else, I'll write print by, right? So if 9 is greater than 0, print hello. Otherwise, print by. So, as you might know, this is going to print hello because 9 is always greater than 0. What if I change this? What if I flipped it? If 9 is smaller than 0, print hello. Otherwise, print by. Well, 9 is not smaller than 0, so it should print by this time. Print by. Here we had very basic conditions if, comparing two hard-coded numbers, but we can abstract out, the stuff with variables here as well. We can say something like if favorite food is burgers, then write hello. Otherwise, print by. Right. So Python is giving us a warning here. It's not an error, but you see how it printed hello. So we can either write is, if the favorite food is burgers, then do something. We can also replace is with two equal signs. And this means the same thing. So if I replace it with two equal signs, it basically means it checks for equality. So if the value of favorite food is the same as burgers, then print hello. So what if I change this to one, something like, let me change this to, this letter, 23.9. So what is the value of favorite food right now? Well, we know it's burgers, right? Is it, is burgers equal to this? No, it's not, right? They're not the same thing. This is the number 23, and this is a text that says burgers. So in this case, it should print by, and it did. So that's, what conditionals are. You may or may not need them with data science. Things like F strings are very useful. You definitely should be knowing the different data types, right? And you should also be, very familiar with variables, because as you can see, variables were used everywhere in this code. So that's, and it helps keep things dynamic. So you want to make sure that you're using variables.